I found a photo album in my wife's room. It was filled with pictures of the same boy. Candid shots from the time he was 6 all the way up to now. This must be the one that got away. I finally understood why I could never win her heart. Completely disheartened, I tricked her into signing the divorce papers. But after the mandatory cooling-off period ended, she was the one chasing me, begging for another chance. "Mr. Hayes, I'd like to ask you about a divorce. In the 3rd year of our marriage, I decided to end it. But I was doing it behind my wife's back. The lawyer across from me was a friend of my parents. After hearing me out, he sighed. For a divorce, both parties need to sign the agreement. Is your wife not here today?" I was silent for a few seconds. "I'll get her to sign it. All right, I'll draft a preliminary agreement for you." After a short wait, I had the papers in my hand. I walked out of the office with my head down, replaying the events of the last few months in my mind. Just as I reached the reception desk, a familiar voice stopped me. "Billy, what are you doing at the firm?" I looked up into Helen's deep, perceptive eyes, and my heart skipped a beat. Who would have thought I'd run into my own wife while getting advice on how to divorce her? But she wouldn't figure it out. After all, she'd never really paid any attention to me. Taking a deep breath, I tried to hide the tremor in my voice. "I was just asking Mr. Hayes about something. Oh, and the documents for that property transfer my parents mentioned are ready. I just need your signature." I flipped the divorce agreement to the last page, laid it on the counter, and handed her a pen. The last page only had the signature line. Helen's professional instincts as a risk analyst made her frown. She was about to take a closer look when a familiar figure appeared by the elevator. Her eyes flickered. After a second's hesitation, she took the pen and signed where I pointed. "Okay, it's done. You can go home. I still have work to do." The weight in my chest lifted, but it was quickly replaced by a flash of self-pity. If she had just looked a little closer, she would have known she wasn't signing a property agreement. It was a divorce agreement, but her attention was completely stolen by Howard, who had just walked in. Looking at his handsome face, my stomach twisted. I gripped my bag tightly and turned to leave. As the glass door closed behind me, I faintly heard their voices. "Helen, who was that?" "Just a friend. He was here for a consultation, too." Helen's usually cool voice had a hint of warmth in it. "You're here early. Wait for me for a few minutes and we can get lunch together. Okay?" Hearing her almost coaxing tone, I looked down at the signed divorce papers in my hand and gave a bitter smile. Yes, I was here for a consultation, a divorce consultation. Soon, in just 1 more month, Helen would get her wish. Helen and I kept our marriage a secret. Besides our parents, no one knew we were husband and wife, including the one that got away. It was her decision to keep it quiet. We were classmates in college. I fell for her on the first day of school and chased her for 4 years, but she never showed any interest. But I wasn't too heartbroken. She hadn't accepted me, but she hadn't accepted anyone else either. It seemed like she just wasn't interested in romance. After graduation, I got busy with work while she went on to grad school. Our paths diverged, but I never forgot her. 3 years later, our parallel lines suddenly crossed at a blind date. At our first meeting, Helen got straight to the point and asked if I had any intention of getting married. I didn't know why she was in such a hurry, but my long-held dream was finally within reach, and I was overjoyed. Figuring her family was just putting pressure on her, I agreed without a second thought. It was only after we were married that I slowly discovered her secret. It wasn't that she was indifferent to love, it was that her heart already belonged to someone she couldn't have. His name was Howard, the younger brother of her best friend. He was 5 years younger than Helen and had always seen her as an older sister. It was a classic case of unrequited love. Howard never knew how Helen felt. Right after graduation, he married his girlfriend of 3 years. Devastated and pressured by her parents to move on, Helen rushed into marrying me. When I found out the truth, I was crushed for a long time, but I eventually pulled myself together. I told myself that time was on my side. If I just tried hard enough, I could make her see me. But for 3 years, she remained as cold as ever. Just as my confidence was about to crumble, I found the photo album. It was filled with pictures of a boy from age 6 to 25. The same boy my wife had been in love with for years. And the album was still being updated. I couldn't just let it go. Especially since, not long ago, Helen, who never touched alcohol, got drunk. Her eyes, usually so distant, were practically overflowing with joy. I later found out why Howard had gotten a divorce. In that moment, I laughed at my own foolishness and decided to end this hopeless marriage. After getting her signature, I went back to the home we'd shared for 3 years, a bitter taste in my mouth. Looking around at the cozy little place I had built with my own hands, memories flooded my mind. My gaze drifted and finally settled on the wedding photo on the living room wall, which I always kept clean. Seeing the forced smile on Helen's face in the picture was like a dagger in my heart. I couldn't stand it. I took the photo down and threw it in the trash downstairs. I spent the rest of the night sorting out our marital assets. When Helen got home, she noticed the missing photo right away. For once, she asked, "Where's the wedding picture?" The nail was loose. I was afraid it would fall and hurt someone, so I took it down. She didn't ask any more questions. She placed the late-night snack she'd brought on the table next to me and went into the study. The strong, spicy aroma hit me, and I paused my work. I opened the bag and saw the fiery red of spicy hot pot. A lump formed in my throat. For 3 years, I'd eaten bland food because of my stomach problems. My wife had no idea. The old me would have eaten every last bite just to please her, no matter how spicy it was. But the new me just took the whole bag downstairs and threw it away. From today on, I was throwing away all the pain and sadness from this marriage. And I was throwing her away too. It was late, but I couldn't sleep. As I lay there with my head buried in the pillow, a hand suddenly wrapped around my waist. I felt the heat of her body behind me and instinctively pulled away, dodging the kiss she was about to give me. My rejection clearly surprised Helen. After all, for the past 3 years, I had always been the one to initiate things. For her to be in the mood for once, only to be turned down, made her ask, "Bad mood?" My stomach's been bothering me lately. I made up an excuse. Helen didn't think much of it, just hummed in response and tucked the covers in around me. Before bed, she was reviewing her work for the day as usual when she suddenly remembered the property agreement from earlier. "Where's that property agreement? I want to check it for any potential risks." My heart hammered against my ribs.
Ist er here?
"Are you sure you want to see it?" Seeing my tense expression, Helen frowned slightly and nodded. After a long silence, I got up and went to the study to get the agreement. Just as I was about to hand it to her, the phone rang. Helen answered it first. "Helen, Haley is drunk and making a scene outside again. Can you come over?"
I'm scared.
Haley was Howard's volatile ex-wife. Helen's face changed. She threw on a coat and rushed to leave. As she hurried out, I called after her. "Is something wrong with Howard again?" She was about to say yes, but didn't want me to worry late at night, so she exaggerated the situation. "Yes, his ex-wife is drunk again, blocking his door with a knife. I'm gonna check it out, just in case something happens." I didn't try to stop her, just told her to be safe. After Helen left, I stayed awake until dawn. I picked up my phone to check the time and saw that Howard, who I discreetly started following a couple of days ago, had posted on his story. It was a video of a red sun rising slowly between skyscrapers, bathing the city in golden light. Cheers could be heard in the background. The camera panned, and for a split second I saw Helen. The caption read, "The darkness is in the past. A new life is about to begin." Staring at the screen, my chest tightened, and a dull ache spread through me. It looked like Howard's divorce was final. Of course it was. With Helen, a top-tier risk analyst with all her connections, helping him, and with her having been in love with him for so many years, she probably would have moved heaven and earth for him. Now that he was single again, it wouldn't be long before Helen asked me for a divorce so she could be with him. I didn't even have to ask. I could already picture it. A self-deprecating smile spread across my face, my heart filled with a desolate coldness. The divorce was inevitable. I had just moved up the timeline. Better to be the one who leaves than the one who gets left behind. At least I could keep some dignity, right? I put down my phone, got up, and started throwing all the matching couple things we owned into a cardboard box. I dragged it downstairs. Helen, who was just getting back, saw me struggling and rushed over to help. "Why are you throwing out so much?" I looked down. "We never use this stuff. Might as well toss it, make some space." Helen nodded in understanding and lifted the box herself. As I watched her walk away, my expression was calm. If she had just opened the box and looked inside, she would have seen that she was about to throw away things I once treasured. With her sharp instincts, she would have definitely sensed something was wrong with my unusual behavior. The story could have had a different ending, but Helen did nothing. She dropped the box into the dumpster and walked away, without a second glance. That afternoon, my computer crashed. To get my data sorted out quickly, I borrowed Helen's laptop. While a file was transferring, a new message popped up. I clicked on it without thinking and saw it was from Mr. Hayes. "Helen, the firm is having a dinner with your department tonight. Want to bring your boyfriend?" Seeing the message, my hand trembled slightly. In 3 years of marriage, Helen had never told anyone about us. To the outside world, she was single. That's why no one recognized me when I went for a consultation at the law firm she worked with so closely. Would she say yes this time? I didn't know, and I didn't dare to hope. Helen saw the message, and her head snapped up to look at me, as if trying to read my expression. Noticing her gaze, I forced a small smile. "Are you going to take me to the party?" The unspoken question hung in the air. "After 3 years, are you finally going to tell people about us?" Helen didn't know how to answer. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. That moment of silence felt like a blade twisting in my heart, a dull, throbbing pain. I pushed the feeling down, put on an indifferent expression, and said casually, "I have plans tonight anyway. Even if you wanted to take me, I probably don't have time." The tension in Helen's shoulders relaxed, and her face returned to normal. "Well, maybe next time, then." I didn't respond. I covered my eyes with my hand and answered her silently in my head. "Next time? Helen, there won't be a next time." That night, Helen went to the dinner alone. As soon as she walked in, she was surrounded by a few drunk colleagues. "It's been 3 years, and we still haven't seen your boyfriend. Helen, that's not right. Come on, let us meet the guy. How long are you going to hide him?" Amid the teasing, Helen pulled out her phone. She had 2 choices, Howard or me. After a long hesitation, she tapped on Howard's profile and sent him a message. A little while later, Howard arrived. The moment he walked through the door, the whole room lit up. Everyone started gushing about what great taste she had. Later in the evening, Mr. Hayes needed to use the restroom. He handed a file to Helen and asked her to give it to a young man waiting downstairs. It was a simple favor, so of course she agreed. She took the contact info and went downstairs, glancing at the file's contents on the way. After waiting for a while and seeing no one, she typed the number into her phone, only to find it was already saved as a contact. The name Billy stared back at her. Helen froze. She pulled the document out of the folder, about to examine it more closely, when a pair of blinding headlights flashed in her eyes. Shielding her eyes, she looked up and saw me. Suspicion bloomed on her face. She held up the file and demanded, "A divorce settlement agreement? Billy, what is this?" I hadn't expected to be caught, but I kept my composure and lied. "It's for Ken. He's getting a divorce, so I put him in touch with Mr. Hayes." Helen's gut told her something wasn't right. She frowned, about to open the agreement, when an arm slipped around hers from behind. "Helen, didn't you have a client meeting? What's taking you so long?" Seeing Howard so close, Helen was flustered. She didn't dare look at me and had no idea how to explain. But more than explaining, she didn't want to push away Howard, who was willingly getting closer. I, however, was far calmer than she expected. I walked forward, took the agreement from her hands, gave a slight bow, and said in a detached tone, "Thank you, Miss Hayes. My friend and I are busy with his divorce, so we won't keep you." The night wind whipped through the car window, messing up my hair. All the way home, the image of Howard at Helen's side played over and over in my mind. Maybe I'd been hurt too many times, because now I just felt numb, overcome with an endless exhaustion. 30 days. The cooling off period felt like an eternity. I rubbed my tired eyes, and for a second, I didn't see the car in front of me illegally backing up. I crashed right into it. After a loud bang, my leg was pinned by the twisted car door, blood streaming down. My face went pale, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Through the searing pain, I managed to stay clear-headed enough to call 911. In the emergency room, the doctor said it wasn't life-threatening, but I'd need minor surgery. He told me to contact my family. My parents were out of state, so I had no choice but to call Helen. But I called over a dozen times, and she didn't pick up once. I remembered she was with her colleagues, with the man she secretly loved by her side. They were probably laughing and drinking. When would she have time to answer my call? A nurse standing by saw I couldn't reach anyone and kindly asked, "Is your wife really unable to come?" I shook my head, my voice flat. "We're already divorced. Just a couple more weeks and it's final." The nurse was taken aback. "But you're still legally married until then, right? Surely she can come and sign the papers." Thinking about our 3 years of marriage, a wave of emotions washed over me. I had waited up late for her countless times just to have dinner, only to get a text saying she was working late and not coming home. I had studied finance just to have something to talk to her about, only for her to dismiss me as a layman, crushing my confidence. I had planned a surprise for her birthday to make her happy, only for her to say she was too tired and didn't have the energy. From start to finish, I was the only one trying to hold this relationship together. Every single memory was proof that she had never loved me. Helen wasn't coming. I couldn't lie to myself anymore. What's the point of a wife coming if she can't even be reached when her husband is in a car accident? The nurse sighed, her eyes full of sympathy. Then maybe call a friend. For the next few days, Ken took care of me. Helen only got the news 4 or 5 days later. When she rushed to the hospital and saw the wound on my ankle, she looked confused. "You were in an accident. Why didn't you tell me?" I was about to explain, but when I looked up and saw her expression, I was suddenly reminded of the dozen missed calls. I swallowed the words stuck in my throat and forced a faint smile. "You were busy. I didn't want to bother you with a minor injury." My words seemed to spark a flicker of guilt in her. She decided to explain what had happened. "Billy, I just happened to run into Howard that day. Don't overthink it. Is Howard's divorce finalized?" It was the first time she'd ever heard me ask about him. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, but she answered honestly, "Yes, it's done. He's divorced." The smile on my face widened. "That went smoothly," I said quietly. "I hope mine goes just as smoothly." Helen didn't understand what I meant. She was about to ask when her phone rang again. Seeing who was calling, she hesitated for a moment before stepping into the hallway to take the call. When she returned half an hour later, the door to my room was slightly ajar, and she could hear my voice from inside. "Yeah, just have to wait for the cooling off period to end. 15 more days, and then I'll finally be free." The image of the settlement agreement flashed in her mind. Remembering my cryptic comment from earlier, Helen's heart began to pound. She pushed the door open. Cooling off period? Who's getting a divorce? I hadn't expected her to come back. Luckily, Ken had just arrived. I forced my expression to remain calm and pointed at him. "Ken, he's getting divorced." Ken glanced between the two of us and quickly caught on. He nodded. Yeah, that's me. I'm getting divorced. We're already in the process." Helen wasn't close to me, so she didn't really know my friends. She'd only met Ken a couple of times and didn't know his situation. She frowned. "Why didn't you ask me for help with the divorce?" Ken was at a loss for words, stammering. Seeing him struggle, I jumped in. "You were busy with Howard's divorce back then. I didn't want to bother you, so we went to Mr. Hayes instead." The mention of Howard flustered Helen, and she dropped the subject. "Well, if you run into any problems later, you can come to me." Even though we'd managed to cover it up, I didn't feel relieved. With her professional instincts, how could she not notice something was off about this whole chain of events? But whenever Howard was involved, it was like she lost all reason and judgment, pushing everything else aside. They say love is blind. I was finally starting to understand what that meant. I watched Helen's fingers fly across her phone screen, her restlessness obvious. I started counting down the minutes until she would leave. I counted from 10 down to 1, and right on cue she stood up with an excuse. Billy, something came up at work. I have to go. What day are you getting discharged? I'll come pick you up. I knew she was lying, but I didn't care anymore. 5 days. On the day I was discharged, I waited from morning till night, but Helen never showed. I opened my social media and saw Howard had posted a photo from the beach. I had a feeling I knew what was going on, so I gave her a call. Before I could even speak, the sound of waves in the background told me everything. But Helen was oblivious, still making excuses. Billy, I'm on a business trip out of town right now. What's up? Of course she forgot about picking me up. No matter how many times it happened, Howard always came first. And I was always the second choice, the backup plan. But at least I had finally woken up. I was done standing in the background, foolishly waiting for her. I didn't call her out on it. I just feigned concern like I always did. When did you leave? How long will you be gone? Got here the day before yesterday. I should be back tomorrow. I hummed in acknowledgement, told her to take care of herself, and hung up. I called a car myself and stood by the road, pulling out my calendar and counting down the days until the divorce was final. 10 days. 10 more days and I would be completely free. The world would be wide open and I'd be on my own. No one to pick me up from the hospital? What did a little thing like that matter anymore? It wasn't worth getting upset about. Back home, I wanted to speed up the process of moving out. But my leg hadn't fully healed, which made it difficult to get around, so I called a moving company. The living room was filled with boxes of all sizes. Movers were busy packing and carrying things in and out, and the front door was wide open. When Helen arrived home to this chaotic scene, she quickly asked what was happening. I delivered the excuse I had prepared. The seaside condo is finally renovated. It's closer to your office, so let's move there. It'll be more convenient. Remembering the property document she'd signed, Helen nodded. After changing her shoes, she sat down on the sofa, picturing the layout of the new place while making small talk with me. You like to garden, don't you? We could clear out the east-facing balcony for your flowers. After a few seconds of silence, I spoke softly. No need. I've given up that hobby. Helen's eyes instinctively flickered to the fresh bouquet of lilies on the table, and she had a feeling I wasn't telling the truth. She was about to press the issue when she noticed that the boxes the movers were carrying seemed to be filled with only her things. She changed the subject. Why are they only moving my stuff? Where's yours? It's all been moved already. My quick reply made her assume I meant it had all been moved to the new place, so she didn't ask any more questions. She got up to pour a glass of water, casually giving instructions to the movers. Please make sure to label all the boxes and put them in the right rooms when you get there. I watched her for a moment, a flicker in my eyes, and swallowed the words I wanted to say. They won't be in the wrong rooms, because in the new house, there's only your stuff. After everything was packed, Helen helped me downstairs. As we stepped out of the elevator, we ran straight into Howard and his sister, Fiona. We all froze. Helen hadn't expected this. A flicker of panic crossed her face. She let go of my arm and stepped in front of me. What are you guys doing here? Fiona raised an eyebrow. Howard said he wanted to see your new place. I've never been either, so we got the address from your parents to surprise you. Howard's eyes, however, were locked on me. If he remembered correctly, he'd seen me at least twice before, right? Once at her company and once outside a restaurant. A strong gut feeling made him curious about who I was. He smiled and tested the waters. Helen, who's this? For once, Helen was silent, seemingly trying to figure out how to introduce me. My face was a mask of calm. I even extended a hand to Howard in a friendly gesture. Billy. I was a college classmate of Helen's. I'm going through a divorce right now, so I came to an old friend for help. Didn't expect to walk in on her moving. Bad timing. My words snapped Helen out of it. She shot me a guilty look, then went along with my story and introduced everyone. Although everything seemed normal, Howard still had his doubts. But with so many people around, he didn't press the issue and instead urged his sister to help with the move. Howard came over to me and started a conversation. "Billy, why are you getting a divorce?" I was surprised by how forward he was. After a moment, I gave a slight smile. "My wife is in love with another man." Hearing that I had a similar story, Howard was instantly sympathetic. "Same here, pretty much. But don't worry, everything gets better once the divorce is final. I'm sure Helen will help you get through it, right?" She'd already helped me with the hardest part, getting the signature. I nodded and followed his lead. "I heard she handled your divorce, too. She must have been a huge help." A shy look crossed Howard's face, and his voice became lighter. "Yeah, Helen was amazing. She helped me gather evidence to sue my ex-wife while also staying by my side to protect me. If she hadn't stepped in, who knows what that psycho ex of mine would have done." Watching him recall the past with such a sweet expression, I was stunned for a moment, then asked something a little out of place. "Are you in love with Helen?" The question made Howard freeze. He struggled for a long time before finally stammering out an answer. "I don't know. At first, I only saw her as a big sister. She was always taking me out to play, taking care of me, buying me gifts. When I was a kid and got bullied, she'd stand up for me, even if she got hurt herself. When she found out I was getting a divorce, she was the one who came to me and offered to help. It wasn't until later that my sister told me, Helen has secretly been in love with me for a long time. She's such an unapproachable goddess, but she had a secret crush. I don't even know how she fell for me." Listening to him ramble on about their past, my feelings were a tangled mess. From Howard's stories, I was getting to know a completely different Helen from the one I knew. So it wasn't that she was cold by nature, just that she wasn't into me. It wasn't that she was never proactive, just that I wasn't the one who could inspire her to be. It's a shame I fell so hard and figured it out so late, wasting so many years on her. Lost in his memories, Howard didn't notice the complicated look on my face. After our talk, he already considered me a trusted friend. He gathered his courage and asked me, a near stranger, the question that had been weighing on his mind. "Billy, what do you think of Helen?" I understood what he was really asking. I looked up at the apartment that was about to be empty and answered honestly. "I've known her for 10 years, but it's only recently that I've realized I don't know her at all. So I don't think I can answer that. But I can tell you this. I've never seen her love someone as much as she loves you." Howard nodded thoughtfully, seeming a bit more at ease. As the sun began to set, he grabbed my arm and invited me to join them for dinner. Helen, who was just coming downstairs, froze again, the reluctance written all over her face. Seeing her expression, I smiled faintly and declined his offer. "I have something to do tonight, so I won't intrude." Before Howard or his sister could react, Helen was already helping me into her car. "You guys go ahead. I'll meet you after I drop him off." The moving truck followed our car out of the complex. Helen's heart pounded in time with the traffic lights as she frantically tried to come up with a reasonable explanation. I was the one to break the awkward silence, my tone light. "You don't have to be so tense. Didn't we agree before we got married to keep it a secret from everyone but our parents, until we both felt the time was right to go public? I understand that you're not ready yet." My gentle tone slowly calmed Helen's racing heart. She took a deep breath, a hint of gratitude in her voice. "Thank you for understanding. I've actually gotten used to being married. Just give me a little more time, and I promise I'll tell everyone." I made a barely audible sound of agreement and turned to look out the window. 3 years of marriage, and she still hadn't told anyone. And she still needed more time. But I was done waiting. I was tired. I was silent for the rest of the drive. Helen could tell I'd been in a low mood lately, but she couldn't figure out why. She mentally reviewed all the events of the past few weeks. She concluded that I was down because she'd been so focused on helping Howard with his divorce that she'd neglected me. A pang of guilt hit her, and for the first time, she took the initiative. "Our 3rd anniversary is coming up. Let me take you on a trip to relax." With only a few days left in the cooling-off period, I didn't want any complications, so I used my leg injury as an excuse to decline. Helen considered it and agreed it probably wasn't a good idea. She suggested a few other ways to celebrate, letting me choose. But for every suggestion she made, I found an excuse, rejecting them all. I seemed to have no interest in celebrating. This cold indifference was a stark contrast to my usual excitement at the mere mention of a date, and it immediately made her suspicious. Seeing the confusion on her face, I worried she might figure something out, so I made a suggestion. That day is a weekend. Why don't you come with me to visit our old campus? Why the sudden nostalgia? Helen couldn't guess what I was thinking, but she didn't want to spoil my mood, so she nodded in agreement. The car fell silent again. I pulled out my calendar and looked at the two dates, side by side. September 7th was marked with the word divorce, and September 6th was our wedding anniversary, and the 10th anniversary of the day my crush on her began. Revisiting the place where it all started on such a significant day, it felt like a fitting end, didn't it? It would be my way of closing the chapter on 10 years of my life. As I thought about it, a smile appeared on my face, and my voice sounded lighter, almost joking. You're not going to stand me up this time, are you? A rare smile touched her lips. When have I ever stood you up? Billy, don't make things up. I just smiled and didn't answer, counting silently in my head. Last time, you left me at the hospital to go to the beach with Howard. The time before that, you completely forgot the birthday dinner you promised me because you were helping him gather evidence for his divorce. And the time before that, you left me stranded in the suburbs to rush off and comfort him. Again and again, whenever it involved Howard, you stood me up. For the next week, Helen didn't come back. The first thing I did every morning was tear a page off the wall calendar. I stayed alone in the empty old house, slowly clearing out the last of my things. Time flew by, and soon it was September 6th. I got up early, picked out an old shirt from years ago, and grabbed my camera before heading downstairs, planning to capture some memories on this significant day. Helen was already waiting downstairs and eagerly opened the car door for me. Maybe because I knew freedom was just around the corner, I was in a great mood, and I started telling her stories from our school days. We chatted back and forth, completely engrossed in our conversation. Helen gradually relaxed, even offering to take lots of pictures of me later. Laughing and talking, we soon arrived at the entrance of Eastwood University. I got out of the car first and leaned against the window, waiting for her. Just as Helen unbuckled her seatbelt, her phone buzzed. She opened it to see a message from Howard. Helen, are you free? I have a fever. Can you come take me to the hospital? The word fever made Helen pause. I saw her hesitating in the car and leaned over to see what was going on, catching her uncertain expression. A moment later, she made her decision. Billy, something came up at work. I have to go in. I froze for a second, a flicker of surprise in my eyes. Can you go in an hour? I knew she was lying. It had to be about Howard again. It's important. I don't think so. Her tone was firm. I didn't expose her lie, just gave her a long, deep look and let her go. Helen buckled her seatbelt again. As an apology, she made a new promise. You can take a cab home. I'll bring you back here in a few days when things calm down. We can even have dinner with a few of our old professors later. I didn't respond to her promise. Helen, there won't be a later. I watched her car disappear from view, then took my camera and walked onto the campus alone. In just half an hour, I had revisited all the places tied to my youth and my secret love for her. After taking all the pictures, I didn't go anywhere else. I just hailed a cab and went home. A little red dot appeared on my social media feed. I tapped on it. A refresh brought up a new post. A photo from Howard, taken in a hospital. In that moment, I knew for sure. She hadn't gone to work. She had gone to take care of a sick Howard. Remembering the conviction in her voice that evening, I just smiled. You couldn't even spare half an hour for me? Helen, if you knew that those few hours were the last we'd ever spend together, would you regret standing me up again? No one answered me, and I no longer cared about the answer. I glanced at it once, then closed the app and found Mr. Hayes's contact. Mr. Hayes, today is the last day of the cooling-off period. Do I need to come to your office for any other procedures? Mr. Hayes replied quickly. No need. Billy, your cooling-off period is over, so the process is complete. You should get out and clear your head. I'm taking a few days off soon. I can hang out with you if you want. The kindness in his message warmed me. I smiled and headed home. 3 hours to go. I threw out the last of my remaining belongings, then lay down on the sofa and watched the sunset. 2 hours to go. I took out my laptop and edited today's photos into a video. 1 hour to go. The video was done. After watching it once, I turned the camera on myself again and hit record. I was going to record a farewell letter to Helen. Finally, with the video complete, I put the memory card back in the camera, then found the divorce agreement and placed them both on the nightstand in the bedroom. Helen, from this moment on, we are divorced. Congratulations to you, and congratulations to me. With that, I picked up my last bag and left that home, left that city. No one knew where I was going, but I left without hesitation, without a single look back. Meanwhile, Helen didn't leave Howard's place until he was mostly recovered. As she drove, she tried calling me, wanting to make good on her promise. But after more than 10 calls, all she got was a "this number has been disconnected" message. Her texts went unanswered. In 3 years of marriage, this was the first time Helen couldn't reach me. Remembering the car accident, a wave of worry washed over her, and she turned the car around and headed home. In the new house, everything was arranged exactly as it had been in our old place, no longer in chaotic piles. But one look was all it took for Helen to realize something was wrong. Where was all my stuff? The realization made her heart pound. She rushed back to the old house. The entire place was empty. She searched every room but found no one. It wasn't until she entered the bedroom that she saw a camera and a stack of papers on the nightstand. Remembering how happy I'd been with the camera a few days ago, Helen felt a wave of relief. She turned it on, curious to see what I had filmed. A video popped up with upbeat music, showing scenes from our old university. Text occasionally flashed across the screen. She was about to hit pause when she read the words. Helen, the main square is still full of skateboarders. I remember this is where I first told you how I felt. You turned me down so gently, but I was bummed out for the whole day. Helen, the library is still packed. I didn't want to disturb anyone, so I just took a picture from far away. This spot looked familiar. It used to be your favorite. Helen, this is where you used to play basketball. And this is where I secretly watched you for 4 years. Watching the scenes unfold, Helen felt as if she had been transported back 6 years to those carefree college days. Remembering that time, remembering the boy who was always following her around, a smile unconsciously touched her lips. The music ended, but there was still a minute left in the video. She thought it might be a secret surprise and looked around, but I was nowhere to be seen. Full of questions, she pressed play. After a few frames of black, my face appeared on the screen. Seeing my red-rimmed eyes and exhausted expression, a terrible premonition crept into Helen's heart. Helen, this year marks the 10th anniversary of when we met, and the 10th year of my crush on you. Hard to believe, isn't it? The time I've liked you has to be measured in a decade. 10 years. 7 years of pining, 3 years as your husband. I spent every moment trying to win your heart, and I gave it my all. But if you don't like someone, you just don't. Another 3, 7, or 10 years wouldn't change the fact that you don't love me. So, on this memorable day, I've made an important decision. I'm letting go of this obsession, and I'm letting you be with Howard. So when you see this video, I just want to tell you, no, I should say, inform you of one thing. Helen, we're divorced. A month ago, I signed the papers, and so did you. So starting today, we're both free. I'm gone. Don't look for me. I hope you and Howard find happiness together. And I hope the rest of my life is my own. Every word struck Helen like a clap of thunder. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her eyes widened, her lips trembling uncontrollably. What did he mean? I signed and she signed and we were already divorced? When did she sign anything? The camera fell from her hands with a thud, knocking over the folder on the table, which landed in her lap. The large words "divorce agreement" were staring up at her. She snatched it up and flipped to the last page. There was my signature, and a few inches to the left, in the other signature box, was another name. The handwriting was incredibly familiar, because she had written it herself. 3 bold, flowing characters. Helen. In an instant, all the details Helen had previously ignored came flooding back. That day at the firm, I said I needed her signature, but I was coming from upstairs, where Mr. Hayes's office was. The time Mr. Hayes asked her to pass along a settlement agreement, and I had a flash of panic on my face when I saw her. And all the things that had been disappearing from the house over the past month, they all belonged to me. Thinking about the layout of the new house, Helen was almost certain. This was all part of my plan. Right under her nose, I had spun a massive lie, tricked her into signing the divorce papers, and then left without a word. As the pieces fell into place, a storm of anger and panic surged through Helen. She grabbed the agreement and the camera, ran downstairs and sped to her office. She burst into the second-floor office and slapped the divorce papers on Mr. Hayes's desk. "This divorce case, did you handle it, Mr. Hayes?" Seeing her distress, Mr. Hayes quickly put down his tea and flipped through the documents. "Yes, I did. What's wrong?" Helen's anger reached its peak. She lost all composure, forgetting about the professional relationship between her company and the firm, and screamed, "It was Billy's case. Why didn't you tell me beforehand?" Mr. Hayes had no idea what was going on. He was completely baffled. "The case followed all legal procedures and has been submitted for review. There were no issues. Why would I need to inform you beforehand? It involved me. Why didn't you tell me?" Hearing her accusation, Mr. Hayes quickly flipped to the last page to see the husband's name. "Billy. Billy? Billy's wife is Helen. Helen is married? Isn't she single?" A cloud of confusion enveloped Mr. Hayes, his expression changing rapidly. "Billy's wife is you? Aren't you single?" His words were like a bucket of cold water, completely extinguishing the fire of Helen's rage. As her senses returned, she realized her outburst and quickly bowed in apology. Mr. Hayes wanted to understand what had happened between the two young people he knew, so he tried to get her to stay and talk. But Helen was desperate to find me and was in no mood to explain. "Mr. Hayes, I'll tell you the whole story when I have time. For now, can you just give me Billy's contact information? He's unreachable, but as his lawyer, you must have a way to contact him." I had indeed left a number and an address before I left. But as a seasoned professional, Mr. Hayes firmly refused. "Helen, leaking a client's information is against regulations, even if I know Billy personally. Besides, you and Billy were married. If you just think hard enough, I'm sure you can find a way to contact him. Don't tell me you're not even willing to put in that much effort for him." Mr. Hayes had overestimated Helen's resources. Despite being married for 3 years, she didn't have contact information for any of my family or friends. She couldn't even reach my parents and didn't even know where my hometown was. She genuinely had no way to contact me. She pleaded with him, trying to appeal to his emotions. But no matter how much she tried, Mr. Hayes's answer was always the same: no comment. Defeated, Helen had no choice but to try a different approach. She wrote a letter and asked him to forward it to me. As he was leaving work, Mr. Hayes sent her a message saying that Billy had seen it but hadn't replied. Helen frantically opened her messaging app to text me, only to find my profile picture was grayed out, with the status inactive user. He would go this far just to cut all ties with her after the divorce? In the 10th year of knowing me, Helen suddenly felt like she was meeting me for the very first time. After leaving East City, I went to the train station, picked a random destination, and bought a ticket, embarking on my first post-divorce trip. In one day, I traveled from east to west. The climate grew drier, and the air became fresher. I arrived with my luggage in a completely unfamiliar city, West City. Unlike the fast-paced life of East City, everything here moved at a slower pace. After checking my luggage at the hotel, I began to wander aimlessly. I ordered a local specialty and sat on a bustling street, sipping a cold drink, feeling completely relaxed. My phone chimed. My new messaging app only had a handful of contacts. I opened it and saw 2 messages from Mr. Hayes. "Billy, why didn't you tell me who you were married to? This whole thing is a mess. Helen got really angry with me for not giving her your contact info. She wrote you a letter for me to pass along. You should take a look." I expected Helen to be angry, but I was surprised she would write a letter. I opened the document and was met with a wall of text. My eyes immediately went to the word count. 8,000 words. For a simple divorce, she wrote 8,000 words? Was that really necessary? Was it all just her complaining about me? But I was in a great mood, having escaped the prison of marriage, and I didn't want to read anything that would spoil it. With that thought, I closed the document, silenced my phone, and focused on enjoying the food that had just arrived. After eating, I wandered through the night market, and all the complicated emotions that had been weighing on me dissolved into a healthy appetite. When I got back to the hotel that night, I sent a quick thank you message to Mr. Hayes and attached a document in reply. When Helen received the document, the knot of anxiety in her chest finally loosened. Full of hope, she opened it, only to be stunned. Too long didn't read. We're divorced. Don't contact me. Those two simple lines sent shockwaves through her newly calmed heart. Her fingers flew across the screen as she typed out another long message. But then she remembered his too long, and she jabbed at the delete key in frustration. Finally, her patience worn thin, she threw her phone onto the bed and sank to the floor, closing her tired eyes. Her chaotic mind replayed scenes from the video. She reached for the camera on the table, skipped to the end, and watched it over and over, finally pausing on the frame with Howard. 36 hours after I left, Helen finally figured out why I had divorced her. He knew about her and Howard? The thought made Helen's heart skip a beat. A wave of panic, unlike anything she had ever felt, washed over her. She held her head in her hands, desperately trying to remember where she could have slipped up. Memories flooded back, finally landing on the day we moved. While she and Fiona were running up and down the stairs, Howard and I had been alone for a period of time. But looking back, that was only the 9th day of the cooling-off period. Even if I had found out something then, I couldn't have predicted what was coming. So, the whole thing must have started those 2 days at the law firm, when I tricked her into signing what she thought were property papers. Remembering what had happened the day before that, Helen's face instantly went pale. Realizing I had accidentally discovered the photo album, Helen couldn't sleep a wink. All night, her mind replayed the events of the past few years. If the first decade was about chasing Howard, then the 3 years after his marriage were about learning to let him go. From the moment he married someone else, she had decided to see him only as a little brother. As for me, the one who had been chasing her, Helen initially just saw me as a friend. Perhaps because we both knew the pain of unrequited love, she had always felt a sense of guilt towards me. This guilt lingered for years, until we met again 3 years ago. The first time she saw me again, she knew I hadn't moved on. So, when she was being pressured to get married, she spent a long time wrestling with the same question. Should she listen to her parents and marry a stranger from a blind date? Or should she accept me and give me a chance? In the end, she thought that if she married me, at least I wouldn't have to suffer as she had. A younger Helen believed that by fulfilling my wish, she could erase the despair of wanting something she couldn't have. But she didn't know back then that getting what you don't truly want can sometimes be a harder fate to accept than not getting it at all. And giving someone what they want isn't always a simple act of kindness. On one side was the abyss of a love already lost on the other, the fortress of a marriage she was about to enter. She was torn between the two, feeling like she was being split in half. On the verge of a breakdown, she suggested keeping the marriage a secret, and I agreed without a second thought. Helen entered into marriage in a daze, not knowing how to forget one person or how to build a life with another. In the 3 years of their marriage, she and Howard rarely spoke, only seeing each other at occasional group gatherings. She put all the group photos into that album. Day by day, she was learning to let go of her obsession. But letting go wasn't easy. Out of years of habit, her eyes would unconsciously find him in a room, and her emotions would still be stirred by him, especially when she heard he was getting divorced. She desperately wanted him to escape his misery and start a new life, which was why she helped him so wholeheartedly. He was someone she had truly loved. Even knowing they could never be together, she still wished him a happy life. But all of this was just in Helen's head. She had never told anyone. They say a secret crush is a story you tell only to yourself. She thought she had hidden it well, but she forgot that I had a crush on her too, and I could easily see through her. And it was only after losing me that she realized how obvious she had been. When the truth came out, her anger wasn't just about being tricked into a divorce. She was angry that I had judged and sentenced her without a single question. Angry that I had left so completely, without a word. Angry that I hadn't even given her a chance to explain. She was also angry at herself for not noticing the signs sooner. Angry at herself for always taking me for granted. Angry at herself for failing to be a wife. And most of all, she was angry at herself for not realizing sooner what I meant to her. After living together for over 1,000 days, she had grown accustomed to having me by her side. Even when Howard got divorced, the thought of leaving me never crossed her mind. Because from the day she got our marriage certificate, she had decided one thing. She was going to spend the rest of her life with me. On the third day of my absence, Helen had exhausted all options and still couldn't find me. As time ticked by, the panic in her heart grew heavier. Howard had tried to see her several times, but she had turned him down every time. So when he finally showed up at her door and saw her looking so worn out, he was shocked. His eyes filled with concern. "Helen, what's wrong?" Seeing Howard now, Helen's emotions were a tangled mess. She had already transitioned her love for him into a familial affection, but she just hadn't found the right moment to tell him. But now, with me gone because of this misunderstanding, she couldn't delay any longer. She had to clear the air. "Howard, I've been trying to contact Billy." "Billy? What happened to him?" Seeing the worry on Howard's face only deepened Helen's shame. "He's disappeared. I can't find him." "What? Why would he just disappear? Is it because of the divorce? Does it have to do with his ex-wife?" "It is about the divorce, and it does have to do with his ex-wife. To be more precise, it has to do with me." Howard was even more confused. Seeing his bewilderment, Helen gathered her courage and told him the truth. "I'm Billy's ex-wife. We got married 3 years ago. We've been hiding it from you all this time."
I'm sorry, Howard.
The news hit Howard like a physical blow. He froze on the spot. So all those strange gut feelings he'd had weren't just his imagination. It all made sense now, but he still couldn't accept it. "Why would you hide it?" he demanded. Was that fair to Billy? Helen was speechless, unable to explain the complex emotions in her heart. Her silence only made Howard more agitated. He remembered his last conversation with me, and his heart filled with guilt and regret. If he had known my wife was Helen, he would have extinguished any improper thoughts and certainly wouldn't have brought up any of that in front of me. The thought that he had, however unintentionally, accelerated the breakdown of our marriage was agonizing for him. "You shouldn't be apologizing to me. You should be apologizing to Billy." "I know, but he disappeared right after the divorce. I can't find him." Hearing this, Howard knew I had completely given up, and his heart ached even more. No one could understand how I felt better than he could. Person can't just vanish. If you have no way to contact him, it just proves you never really cared about him. His words cut straight to the bone, and a sharp pain shot through Helen's chest. She hung her head, a lump forming in her throat. These past 3 years I failed him. I ignored everything he did for me, disregarded his feelings. By the end, her voice was barely a whisper. Howard had nothing left to say. He silently turned and walked away, his steps heavy. Watching him leave, Helen was overwhelmed with grief and remorse. This whole mess was all her fault, but she had dragged 2 innocent people into it. She was filled with a profound sense of shame and regret. By the 7th day of my absence, Helen was at her breaking point. With her back against the wall, she found a strange clarity. The cooling-off period was over, but the paperwork wasn't finished. Whether it was to get the official divorce certificate or to file in court, I would have to come back. Realizing this, the despondent Helen pulled herself together. She ended her leave of absence and went straight to see Mr. Hayes. Over the past few days, Mr. Hayes had forwarded countless messages to me on her behalf. Seeing her looking so gaunt and exhausted, he felt a pang of pity. He was about to offer some words of comfort when she spoke first, her voice calm and steady again. "Mr. Hayes, please tell him I agree to the divorce. Tell him to come back and sign the final papers." Hearing this, Mr. Hayes nearly spit out his coffee. You're giving up just like that? You've only been looking for him for a few days. He refuses to talk to me. What else can I do? I can only give him what he wants. We can't let this end up in court. Mr. Hayes shook his head helplessly. If that's the case, I'll let Billy know. Helen, try not to be too upset. Helen said nothing more and returned to her office. She leaned back in her chair, the tension finally leaving her body as she planned her next steps. In reality, she had no intention of divorcing me. Telling Mr. Hayes that was just a ploy to see me. Once I was back in the city, she would have her chance to explain. I had loved her for 10 years. If she could just clear up the misunderstanding, surely there was a chance to start over. Mr. Hayes's message arrived while I was sunbathing on a beach. Over the past week, I traveled to 2 or 3 cities and had completely put the whole messy divorce out of my mind. Seeing that Helen had agreed to the divorce, a flicker of suspicion arose. She's been harassing me for days, and now she suddenly agrees? Is this another trick? To be safe, I consulted Mr. Hayes about the next steps. When he told me that both parties had to be physically present to get the final divorce certificate, or else we'd have to go through a lawsuit, I groaned. All I wanted was a divorce. Why did it have to be so difficult? It looked like my travel plans would have to be put on hold. I sighed heavily, put on my sunglasses, and went back to the hotel to pack. The next morning at 10, I was on a flight back to East City. Ken was waiting for me at the airport. The moment he spotted me in the crowd, he exclaimed, "Billy, you got so tan." It's not a tan. It's a healthy glow. Seeing me able to joke like that, Ken, who had been worried about me, finally relaxed. He grabbed my arm and we headed home. On the way, I told him about my travels. As much as he envied me, he was also concerned about the divorce. Is Helen really agreeing to this? That was something I wasn't sure about either. But I had come back determined to resolve this once and for all. I nodded firmly. The cooling off period is over. It doesn't matter if she agrees or not. If she changes her mind, I can sue. Don't worry. But if you have to sue, won't that drag on forever? Yeah, that's why I came back. Better to get it over with quickly, before things get even more complicated. After learning from Mr. Hayes that I was back, Helen immediately tried to arrange a meeting, only to be flatly rejected. She was disappointed but knew there was nothing she could do but wait for me to contact her. In the meantime, she read the divorce and settlement agreements over and over, then bought a lot of furniture to match the layout of our old house. Clinging to a sliver of hope that I might forgive her, she tried to recreate our old home, wanting to put everything back the way it was. Days passed. At the end of September, she finally got a call from Mr. Hayes. I wanted to meet, but the location was the entrance to City Hall. All of Helen's hopes were dashed in an instant, but she still went and she brought nothing with her. When I saw her arrive empty-handed, I knew her agreeing to the divorce was just another lie. But I had expected it, so I wasn't that angry, just impatient. You agree to the divorce, but you show up with nothing. Is this your idea of being sincere? We hadn't seen each other in over a month, and my first words were about the divorce. A shadow of sadness crossed Helen's face. She stared at me, searching for any sign of pain or sadness, anything to give her the confidence to keep me. But my face was as calm as a still lake. I looked vibrant, healthier than I had in years. Was she the only one who had been miserable all this time? Helen felt a heavy weight pressing on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Can we talk, Billy? Sure. After we get the divorce certificate, you can talk all you want. My words extinguished the last flicker of hope she had. Her fingers dug into her palms, and her voice became hoarse. I didn't bring my documents. Will you come home with me to get them? I refused without a second thought. You go. I'll wait here. Seeing my refusal, Helen had to find another excuse. You're the one who put most of the stuff away. I don't know where anything is. It might take me a long time to find it. That part, at least, was true. But I had a feeling she had something else up her sleeve. I sent a quick text to Ken before agreeing to go with her. Sitting in the passenger seat again, our minds were in 2 different worlds. Helen couldn't help but think back to our last trip, when we were laughing and talking on the way to our old campus. If she had known that was the last time they'd see each other before the divorce, she never would have left. She would have stayed with me, reminiscing about our 10 years together, and then she would have told me how she really felt and kept me by her side. But there were no do-overs in life. She had to swallow the bitter pill of her own making. After a while, Helen tried to break the silence. "Where have you been all this time?" I kept my eyes on the view outside, my voice still cold. "We're getting divorced. It doesn't concern you." Those simple words were another stab to Helen's heart. Her lips tightened, her eyes full of sorrow. "We've only finished the cooling-off period. We're not officially divorced yet. If the paperwork isn't completed within 30 days, the application becomes void." Billy. I had spent the last few days studying marriage law and knew all the clauses inside and out. I had guessed Helen would use this rule to threaten me, so I didn't fall into her trap and changed the subject. "You don't need to lecture me on the new marriage laws. What I'm curious about is, if you don't even like me, why are you using the divorce to threaten me? Are you not satisfied with the settlement I drafted?" We had stopped at a red light. Helen turned to look at me, her gaze heavy. "I'm not unsatisfied. If you're determined to get a divorce, you can have everything. I'm not trying to threaten you. I just have so many unanswered questions. Can't let it go." Hearing the words "can't let it go" from Helen's lips, I was taken aback. What can't you let go of? The fact that you were divorced without your knowledge? Or that I was the one who initiated it? Neither, Billy. Seeing the confusion on my face, Helen gave a bitter laugh, her voice low and filled with a sigh I couldn't quite decipher. "I can't stand being misunderstood by you. I can't stand that you won't give me a single chance. I can't stand the thought of cutting ties with you completely." This time, it was my turn to be silent. I didn't understand what she meant. Hadn't she been in love with Howard for years? After the divorce, shouldn't she be proposing to him? Why was she holding me here, saying all these things? And why did her tone sound so intimate? My silence gave Helen the opening she needed. "Billy, after I watched that video, I knew why you left. You think I'm still in love with Howard, don't you? Aren't you?" My question hung in the air, adding to the weight of guilt on Helen's shoulders. She suppressed the lump in her throat, her voice soft but filled with sincerity and regret. "I'm sorry. There are things I should have told you a long time ago, but I kept putting it off and I let you misunderstand for so long, let you hurt for so long. It's all my fault. I'm sorry, Billy." To me, her apology sounded strange and out of place, but I didn't want to get into it. All I wanted was to end this and be free. I didn't have the patience for her belated confessions. "You're right, you did wrong me. So if you want to make it up to me, then agree to the divorce. As soon as I have that certificate in my hand, I can forgive you for everything." The words she had prepared for so long died in her throat. The sorrow in Helen's eyes deepened. "But I don't want to get divorced, Billy. I'm trying to win you back. Can you please give me another chance?" I was stunned. I frowned, even rubbed my eyes, wondering if this was really Helen, wondering if this was some kind of trap. "You were heartbroken over him for 3 years and couldn't move on. I tried to win you over for 3 years and you didn't budge. That just proves that our marriage was a rash, mistaken decision from the start. The only reason I want a divorce is to correct that mistake. Now that Howard is divorced and seems interested in you, shouldn't you be supporting me and going after your true love? Why are you fighting me on this?" Because from the day Howard got married, I decided to see him only as a brother. Because from my perspective, our marriage wasn't a mistake and it wasn't rash. I genuinely wanted to spend the rest of my life with you. In all the years I'd known Helen, I had never heard her say something so earnest, something that sounded so much like a confession. But I had finally woken up from that 10-year-long dream. A few words weren't going to change my mind. I closed my eyes, avoiding her intense gaze, my voice calm and sharp. "You say that, but do you even believe it yourself?" I didn't believe her. For Helen, that was a devastating blow. But she also knew that she was the one who had eroded my trust in her. She could only blame herself. She had replayed this outcome in her mind countless times. It was still within the realm of what she could bear. She took a deep breath, her tone even more determined. I will prove to you that everything I'm saying is true. Billy, will you please just give me one more chance? The car had pulled into the underground garage and stopped. I unbuckled my seatbelt and opened the door, my voice tinged with a weary annoyance. Put the divorce certificate in my hand, and then you can prove whatever you want. With that, I got out of the car and walked to the elevator, not caring about her reaction. The conversation had circled back to the divorce. Helen finally understood that I was determined to leave. Her hands clenched into tight fists, veins popping on her arms. Unable to vent her frustration, she could only follow me upstairs. She entered the code, and the door beeped open. I walked in with my head down, hesitating about whether to take off my shoes, when a pair of bear-shaped slippers in the shoe cabinet caught my eye. They were identical to the ones I used to wear at the old house. But I clearly remembered throwing those slippers in the trash the day I left. Why was there an identical pair here? Confused, I looked up and saw the room's layout. I froze. From the curtains to the coffee cups, from the cabinets to the wedding photo in the living room, everything, except for the size of the room, was a perfect replica of our old house. Staring at the surreal scene, I finally spoke. Why did you decorate the house like this? And where did you find all this identical stuff? Helen followed my gaze around the room, her voice full of nostalgia. I always thought you'd move in here with me to start our new life. I never imagined you were already planning to leave me here all alone. If I didn't decorate it like this, I'd feel like I didn't have a home anymore. As for the stuff, it wasn't that hard to find. It just took a little effort. If the memories of the past weren't so vivid, I might have actually felt a pang of guilt for abandoning her. But now I was done playing this melodrama with her. I didn't even bother to change my shoes and strode into the room. This is great. Makes it easier for me to find everything. The sooner I get the documents, the sooner we can get divorced. Very efficient. Every word I'd said since we met again had been a jab at Helen's heart. She was finally realizing that I wasn't naturally mild-mannered and agreeable, I was actually quite sharp-tongued. I had hidden my true self just to be a part of her world, to maintain our marriage. And in those 3 years, the neglect and coldness I endured, the hurt and pain I hid, it must have been 100 times worse than she had ever imagined. I had gone against my own nature to accommodate her, to tolerate a marriage that brought me nothing but unhappiness. And she had taken all my efforts for granted, never showing any understanding, instead rubbing salt in my wounds until I lost all faith in our relationship. In that moment, the truth hit Helen like a dagger to the heart. She felt a sharp, twisting pain in her gut, as if she were being torn to pieces. She couldn't stop it, couldn't fight it, she could only let the agony consume her, because it was all her own doing. It only took me 10 minutes, using the information I had gathered, to find all the documents. After confirming everything was there, I walked out with the file folder and saw Helen slumped by the door. I narrowed my eyes. What was this act now? Was she planning to fake an illness to delay the divorce? As I approached her, I was on high alert, my voice laced with suspicion. Not feeling well? It wasn't a question of concern, but an accusation. Helen could tell the difference. She shook her head, pushed herself up against the door, and forced a smile. I'm fine. Let's go. Seeing her open the door, I slowly let my guard down and followed her out. On the way back to City Hall, neither of us spoke. I kept checking my watch, estimating the time. In a hurry, I even grabbed her hand as we got out of the car and rushed upstairs. Helen remembered our wedding day. I had been just as impatient then, probably afraid she would back out. She hadn't been in a great mood that day, but seeing my anxiousness had made her laugh, and her fear of marriage had eased a little. Who would have thought that 3 years later we would be back in this place, for a divorce? Looking around at the couples waiting to end their marriages, she suddenly felt like getting a divorce wasn't such a big deal after all. If I said our marriage was a mistake, then so be it. Only by ending the mistake here could she have a chance to start over. She wouldn't use marriage to tie me down. Once we were divorced, she would just come back into my life in a different way. This time, it was her turn to prove her feelings to me, starting from scratch. She didn't know if I would give her a chance, the way she hadn't for me, but Helen was no longer lost. She was willing to spend 10 years, or even the rest of her life, pursuing me. Not for any other reason, but for the vow she made when she got married. She had decided to spend her life with me, and she would not go back on her word. The paperwork was finished at exactly 5 o'clock, closing time. Looking at the brand new divorce certificate, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. Even looking at Helen felt easier. I rolled my wrists, my voice light and cheerful. All right, thanks for everything these past few years. We're even now. Bye. I turned to leave, but she grabbed my wrist. Who said we're even? I looked at the certificate in my hand, then at her face, completely baffled by her newfound confidence. The law says we're divorced. How are we not even? Legally, yes, we're no longer husband and wife. But we were once classmates, and that doesn't change. Then let me remind you, we weren't exactly close in school. There's no deep bond worth maintaining. Helen didn't deny it. True, I wasn't very warm to you back then. But whose fault was that? You were always following me around. It was the first time I'd heard her bring up the old days when I chased her, especially at such an awkward time right after our divorce. I started to feel uncomfortable. That was a long time ago. What's the point of bringing it up now? There isn't one. So let's talk about something more recent. Recent? What was she talking about? I had no idea what she was up to. As I was about to ask, she spoke calmly. Didn't you say that after the divorce we could let bygones be bygones, and you'd be willing to talk about whatever I wanted? My smile faltered. I think I did say something like that, but I was just trying to get her to agree to the divorce. I had no intention of actually having a deep conversation with her. Who wants to have a heart-to-heart with their ex-wife right after getting a divorce certificate? You're supposed to go out with your buddies and celebrate your new freedom. I always keep my word, but at this wonderful moment, I didn't want to ruin my mood, so I made an excuse. I did say that, but I didn't say we had to talk right now. Next time, when I have time. Helen didn't let go of my arm. After you tricked me into signing the divorce papers and then disappeared without a word, it's hard for me to trust you. You even changed all your contact information. If you leave today and run off again, how am I supposed to find you to cash in on your promise? Seeing her righteous indignation, I felt a strange pang of guilt. Helen keenly noticed the subtle change in my expression and continued her charm offensive. You wanted a divorce. Even though I didn't want to, I still agreed. I may have stalled for a bit, but in the end, you got what you wanted. I respected your wishes. I didn't hold what you did against you, and all I want is to have an honest conversation with you. You won't even give me that chance? 4 years as classmates, 3 years as husband and wife, are you really going to be this cold? High on the victory of my divorce, I had forgotten my resolve to be ruthless. And seeing Helen so humble in front of me was a first. My heart softened a bit, and I pulled out my phone. Fine, I'll give you my contact info, but you can't bombard me with messages like you did before, and you have to be polite. As for meeting up, we'll figure out a time later. Before I could change my mind, Helen quickly added my contact, then finally let go of my arm. She followed me downstairs, chattering the whole way. And you have to promise not to block me, not to delete me, and not to ignore my messages. You have to keep your promise. My ears were starting to ring. My patience wore thin again. As long as you act like a former classmate and don't cross any lines, I promise I won't delete you. With that assurance, Helen finally relaxed. She opened the passenger side door and gestured for me to get in. I pretended not to see and started walking towards the street to hail a cab. As I turned, a long, mournful sigh came from behind me. We're divorced, so you won't even give me a ride? So cruel. It gave me goosebumps. I walked faster, hopped into a taxi, and told the driver to go. When I got back to Ken's place and opened the door, 2 confetti poppers went off, making me jump. I looked around at the balloons, flowers, and the table laden with snacks and a cake. A banner read celebrating singledom. A lump formed in my throat. Ken, afraid I would cry, gently coaxed me. What are you crying for on a happy day? Suck it up. We're getting wasted tonight to celebrate this glorious day. All the emotions I had suppressed were finally released. I wiped my tears on Ken's shirt and nodded vigorously. Wasted? You can't even outdrink me. Oh yeah? says the guy who hasn't touched a drop of alcohol in 3 years. Today, I'm gonna show you who can't hold their liquor. Bring it on. Today, you're gonna learn what still got it means. Hungover, I slept until the afternoon. Ken had already gone to work. After a simple lunch, I felt a bit restless, so I grabbed my bag and headed out to tick a few items off my to-do list. I took the pastries I had made and went to see Mr. Hayes at his office. Over the past 2 months, Mr. Hayes had put a lot of effort into my divorce, upholding the law to protect my privacy, acting as a middleman, and probably talking Helen down a few times. I owed my smooth divorce to him. I felt like I had caused him a lot of trouble and wanted to thank him in person. When he heard that we had gotten the divorce certificate, a complicated expression crossed his face. "Billy, why did you hide it from me?" I felt genuinely sorry about that. "I never meant to hide it from you. It's just that we kept our marriage a secret, and I didn't want to put you in an awkward position." Mr. Hayes understood and didn't press the issue. "Yes, it was all Helen's fault for not telling us. I heard you two were old classmates. It seems like a shame to divorce so hastily. Are there still unresolved feelings between you? Are you really planning to never see each other again?" His question hit home. Before yesterday, I had fully intended to cut Helen out of my life completely. But after seeing her yesterday, I had a feeling it wouldn't be that easy. Aside from being former classmates, I still had to figure out how to explain the divorce to my parents. Knowing my parents, they would probably want to confront Helen, and I would have to give her a heads up. It seemed like cutting all ties would have to wait until everything was settled. Realizing this, I wanted to sigh, but I held it in. We were together for 3 years and never fought. The divorce was amicable. We're not enemies, but we can't go back to how things were. As for the future, it's hard to say. We might stay in touch or we might go our separate ways. Hearing that I hadn't completely closed the door gave Mr. Hayes a sliver of hope. Over the past month, Helen had been driving herself crazy trying to stop the divorce. He had mentored her, after all, and he was worried she might have a breakdown. But from the sound of it, things weren't completely hopeless. Maybe there was still a chance for them. Mr. Hayes wasn't sure, but he tried to put in a good word for her. After a bit more small talk, I got up to leave. Mr. Hayes opened the door for me, only to be startled by Helen suddenly appearing. He clutched his chest. "What are you doing hiding outside my office?" Helen's gaze went past him, straight to me. Mr. Hayes realized what was happening, quickly stepped aside to let me out, and shut the door behind me. I was startled too. I had specifically asked Mr. Hayes and knew she was on leave today, precisely to avoid her. I couldn't believe she'd gotten wind of it and shown up. I had 2 more appointments and didn't want to get into it with her, so I told her to move. Helen stepped aside, and I walked past her and down the stairs without a moment's hesitation. When I got outside, I realized it had started pouring. The streets were flooded up to my knees. The street was completely empty. I was stunned. I tried to call a car, but after 10 minutes, no one had accepted the ride. The rain was coming down even harder, with no sign of stopping. The forecast said it wouldn't let up until 7 or 8 that night. Was I supposed to wait here for 6 hours? Need a hand? I turned to see Helen leaning against the doorway, her eyes full of concern. I pretended not to hear her. Helen didn't seem fazed and continued. "The last time it rained this hard was a year ago, wasn't it? We were both home that day, and you said you were going to bake a cake." Her voice blended with the sound of the rain as she recounted old memories. With nowhere else to go, I was forced to listen to her reminiscence. As I listened, images started to form in my mind, and my calm began to waver. She talked about the rain, our first date, our marriage, our college days. She seemed lost in the past, her voice thick with nostalgia. The memories she recounted were beautiful and charming, but to me, they just felt hollow. I finally couldn't take it anymore and cut her off. "Since you're so free, you can give me a ride. I'll pay." Her mission accomplished, Helen quickly ushered me into her car. To avoid any more conversation, I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep as soon as I got in. Helen didn't say another word. Just having me sitting next to her seemed to calm her down. When we reached my destination, I took a $100 bill from my wallet and handed it to her. "Thanks for the ride. Keep the change." Helen didn't refuse, accepting it with a smile. It was my pleasure. Feel free to contact me for any future transportation needs. I didn't have the energy to argue. I opened the door to leave, but she stopped me. Howard wants your contact information. Is that okay? Hearing his name made my stomach drop. I remembered that I had secretly added him before. But then I remembered that account was deleted. I relaxed and nodded slightly. The friend request came through and I quickly accepted. The screen showed typing for a long time and my heart started to pound. Why did Howard suddenly want to talk to me? Did he know something? As I was wondering, a message came through. Billy, are you free tomorrow? I'd like to meet and talk. All that typing for just one sentence. And I had no idea how to reply. My feelings about Howard had always been complicated. Before the divorce, we were rivals in a sense. But I knew the problem was never him, it was always Helen. Back then, I envied him with a touch of jealousy and a sense of powerlessness. I didn't want to get close to him, and I didn't want any conflict. Now, after the divorce, we were just acquaintances. I should have politely declined. After all, the only thing connecting us had been severed. But for some reason, I wanted to go. I wanted to hear what he had to say. Driven by curiosity, I agreed and set a time and place to meet. Seeing Howard at the coffee shop felt surreal. It had only been a month, but he looked worn out, not nearly as energetic as before. I was surprised by his change but greeted him politely. After we ordered, an awkward silence fell between us. Finally, Howard broke it. Billy, I asked you here today because I wanted to apologize. I'm sorry. His sincere apology caught me off guard. Quickly waved my hand. There's nothing to apologize for between us. My graciousness only seemed to deepen his guilt. That day, I didn't know you and Helen were married. I said a lot of stupid things that must have hurt you. I'm sorry. So that's what this was about. A small ripple went through me. I looked at him with a hint of pity. I was the one who kept it a secret from you. You were just being honest. I don't hold it against you. Besides, I had already decided to get a divorce by then. If anything, what you said just strengthened my resolve. In a way, I should be thanking you. Otherwise, I might not have moved on so quickly. Howard knew I was just trying to make him feel better, but he couldn't get over his guilt. His eyes welled up with tears. We're both responsible for how things turned out. We both failed you. He was so insistent on taking the blame that I was at a loss for words. Overwhelmed with guilt, Howard became more emotional. Billy, I also wanted to tell you Helen and I have talked. From now on, we're just like brother and sister. Can you please give her another chance? The abrupt change of topic left me speechless. Weren't they supposed to be madly in love? Ready to get married the day our divorce was final? Why was everyone suddenly trying to get me to reconcile with her? The question had been bugging me for a while. This time, I couldn't help but ask. We're divorced. Why aren't you two together? Howard's voice cracked. I've known for a long time that Helen had a crush on me, but I've always just seen her as a big sister, so I pretended not to know. Then I married my first love, but a few months ago, I found out she was cheating on me. I was a wreck, and Helen was the one who helped me through it. I didn't know she was married, and I thought she still liked me. I started to fall for her, but as time went on, I could feel that the way she treated me was different. Before, the way she looked at me was with a romantic interest. But after my divorce, even though she was helping me, it felt more like she was my actual sister. Sometimes I felt like I had two older sisters. The reason I asked you what you thought of her that day was because I couldn't figure out her feelings for me. But after hearing what you said, I thought my gut feeling was wrong, and that's when I started to think about being with her. After you disappeared, I went to find her and found out the truth. I felt so guilty. My own marriage was ruined by a third party, so I couldn't accept the fact that I had destroyed hers. No matter what she was thinking, our story had to end there as friends. Later, when I saw her frantically searching for you, I saw in her eyes the same look she used to have for me. That's when I knew my gut feeling was right. She doesn't love me anymore. She had a new family. She was moving on from the past, and everything should have been fine. But I came along and changed everything. Billy, how can I not feel guilty? By the end, my heart felt like a stone had been dropped into it, sending ripples of shock through me. I had never imagined that from Howard's perspective, the story would be so completely different. Though I was shocked, I wasn't convinced that this was the whole truth. After all, love is a personal experience. If Helen really loved me, would I have not noticed at all? So, in response to Howard's heartfelt plea, I paused for a moment before answering. Whether her feelings for you were romantic, familial, or just friendly, from my perspective, they were much deeper than what she felt for me, her ex-husband. The reason I divorced her wasn't just because of you. It was an accumulation of all the little things that made me see the reality of our marriage and finally give up. My words seemed to resonate with Howard. The advice he was about to give died on his lips. Our eyes met. Seeing his reddened eyes, I sighed softly. At the end of the day, this is between me and Helen. You're an innocent bystander who got dragged into it. Our divorce is a done deal. If I, the one in the middle of it, can move on, why are you, an observer, still hung up on it? Let it go and live your own life. It's not too late for either of us to start over. The conversation was over, but Howard's emotions were still in turmoil. He sat there for a long time before he finally understood what I was trying to say. Let yesterday die with yesterday. Let today be a new beginning. In an instant, the dark clouds that had been hanging over him dissipated. He got up and walked to the private room next door, pushing the door open. The room was silent. Seeing Helen leaning back in her chair, lost in thought, he called her name softly. Helen, are you okay? Every word of our conversation had reached Helen's ears. She was not okay, but in front of Howard, she hid her emotions and feigned composure. I'm fine. Her voice trembled slightly, and Howard noticed immediately. He sat down across from her, thinking for a long time before finding the right words of comfort. I understand how Billy feels. I don't know what happened between you two these past 3 years, but it sounds like he was very unhappy, which is why he wants to end things and start fresh. Helen, since he's moved on, you should stop dwelling on it too. Helen knew Howard was right, but she also knew that the pain and despair I felt in our marriage were her fault. She was the one responsible for this outcome. What right did she have to talk about moving on? No amount of comfort could help her. She didn't want to burden Howard any further, so she changed the subject and offered to drive him home. As they were leaving, Howard asked her a question. Helen, can you let Billy go? Could she? Probably not, Helen thought. A sad smile touched her lips, but her voice was firm. He chased me for 10 years. I married him, but I never truly cherished him. Losing him is the punishment I deserve. 3 years of marriage. He's become an irreplaceable part of my life. How can I just let him go? Whether he hates me or despises me, I want to try again. Regardless of the outcome, I have to follow my heart. Howard didn't try to persuade her anymore. He just waved, a genuine smile on his face. Helen, thank you for everything all these years. I hope you get what you want in the end. After saying goodbye to all my friends, I packed my bags, ready to continue my interrupted trip. Ken drove me to the airport and hugged me tightly, refusing to let go. Be careful out there. Call me if you need anything. Send me pictures of good food, fun places, pretty sights. If you get tired and need a place to crash, just come back. You know the code to my place. Listening to him ramble, I couldn't help but feel exasperated. I'm going on vacation, not getting married off to some remote land. Ken, you old mother hen, can you stop being so dramatic? My words ruined the tearful farewell atmosphere. Ken pinched my cheek. I'm just worried you're gonna go wild again. Last time you disappeared for days without a message. I have to give you a lecture. I've told you 100 times. I replied to you with my mind. Why can't you let it go? We bickered like kids for a few more minutes until it was time for me to board. I went through security, and as I was looking for my seat on the plane, a message from Ken came through. I just saw someone who looked just like Helen from behind. My guard immediately went up. I scanned the cabin, but I didn't see her familiar face. I relaxed a little. You're probably seeing things. I'm pretty sure it was her. Be careful. I was skeptical. I hadn't told anyone my travel plans. How could Helen possibly know? But just in case, I sent a message to Mr. Hayes. Helen resigned 2 days ago. I don't know where she is. The message sent a jolt of unease through me. Helen resigned? Then maybe the person Ken saw really was her. As I was contemplating this, a familiar voice from behind me cleared up the mystery. "Excuse me, sir, could you let me pass?" The sound of her voice made my body go rigid. I turned around numbly and saw Helen standing behind me, feigning surprise. "Billy, what a coincidence." We both knew it was no coincidence. I didn't bother playing along. My brow furrowed. "Why are you on this flight?" "Business trip." Seeing her lie so effortlessly, just like old times, I called her out. "Didn't you resign?" Helen didn't show any shame at being caught. Instead, her eyes lit up with surprise and delight. "You knew I resigned so soon? Billy, are you that concerned about me?" I was speechless. I gave up and went back to my seat. To my dismay, Helen sat down next to me. Seeing my questioning gaze, she waved her ticket. "We're seatmates. You're stalking me, aren't you?" "Helen, that's illegal. Please provide evidence of me stalking you. Otherwise, that's just slander, Billy." I had no evidence, of course, so I tried to reason with her. "We're divorced. Can't we just go our separate ways? Why do you have to keep following me?" Seeing my agitation, Helen's mood seemed to drop. "You promised we would talk, but then you were about to leave again without a word. I was just worried you'd disappear again." I looked up at the ceiling in exasperation. I took a deep breath, turned to her, and said with a calm, pleasant expression, "Fine. What do you want to talk about? Let's talk now. I'm all ears." "Was it the photo album? Is that why you decided to divorce me?" Helen asked the question that had been bugging her. I answered honestly, without hesitation. Yes and no. The thought had been there for a long time. The album was just the spark. Even if I hadn't seen it, I would have eventually reached my breaking point and asked for a divorce. My firm tone seemed to deepen her guilt. I wasn't good enough. "If you were so unhappy with me, why didn't you tell me?" I glanced at her, my voice light. "You never told me you were in love with Howard, did you?" I was just following your example and choosing silence. Seeing that I still misunderstood, Helen rushed to explain. "I did love him, but that was a long time ago. After we got married, I was slowly letting him go, trying to build a life with you." I didn't want to hear her weak, empty words. I cut her off. "I don't care when you let him go, and I don't care if you ever had genuine feelings for me, because it's all in the past. I don't want to waste any more energy on things that don't matter. Do you understand?" Looking into my clear, determined eyes, Helen swallowed the explanations she had prepared. Her hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her eyes were filled with a deep sense of helplessness and sorrow. I didn't care what she was feeling. I was just glad the world was quiet again. I put on my headphones and I masked, ready to get some rest. As the cabin fell silent, Helen turned her head and looked at my peaceful face, so close to hers. The turmoil in her heart began to settle. I was so resistant to talking about the past. She had to let it go. But that didn't mean she was giving up. 2 hours later, the plane landed in West City. As I was pushing my luggage cart towards the exit, I saw Helen in the rearview mirror again, standing right behind me. I shot her a glare. "We've said everything that needs to be said. Are you still going to follow me? We haven't cleared everything up. We've just closed the book on our marriage. But what about the 7 years before that and the rest of our lives? We still have plenty to talk about, don't we?" "What's there to talk about? I had a crush on you for 7 years, and after the divorce, we go our separate ways. End of story." Helen just looked at me quietly. After everything we had been through, when she looked at me now, all she could see was the first time I confessed my feelings to her. Back then, she had politely turned me down, thinking that would be the end of our story. Who would have thought that 10 years later, the story still wasn't over? Only this time, it was her turn to chase me. The past is set in stone, but the future is unwritten. "Billy, don't be so quick to jump to conclusions." Hearing those words after 10 years made me freeze. I looked up at her, standing there with her hands behind her back, and the dusty memories in my mind began to stir. It was evening on the campus of Eastwood University. The warm yellow lights illuminated the bustling crowd. I had stopped Helen in front of the library and, blushing, confessed my feelings. Unsurprisingly, I was met with a polite thank you. In that moment, I was filled with frustration and annoyance, running my hands through my hair. I heard a soft laugh from above and looked up to see a faint smile on her lips. Full of passion and stubbornness, I thought she was mocking me, so I said seriously, "You may not like me now, but the future is unwritten." Helen, don't be so quick to jump to conclusions. Neither of us could have imagined that after all these years, those same words would come back to us. Only our roles were now reversed. The October air in West City was starting to cool. A gentle autumn breeze blew away my exhaustion. I walked into the hotel, looking for my reservation details. And at the front desk, I ran into Helen again. Once is a coincidence, twice is a fluke. A third time, I couldn't take it anymore. This is a huge city with tons of hotels. Don't tell me this is another coincidence. Faced with my angry accusation, Helen was unfazed. Coincidences can be fate or man-made. Either way, doesn't it take some luck for them to happen? Maybe I'm just lucky, and we're fated to be together. I pressed my temples, trying to gather my patience. If we were really fated, would we have gotten divorced? Stop with the blatant lies, Helen. Is it possible that our fate only began after the divorce? She sounded so convincing, but I just thought she was talking nonsense. Couldn't help but scoff. Well, I'd say our fate ran out the day we got divorced. Now it's just bad karma. Helen nodded in agreement. You could call it bad karma, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you hadn't been creating all those coincidental meetings 7 years ago and making such a strong impression on me, I wouldn't have considered you as my first choice for marriage, and we wouldn't have gotten into this mess that has dragged on to this day. Since you think the bad karma you brought upon yourself has run out, I'd be happy to learn from your past persistence and renew our fate. The 4 years I spent chasing Helen felt like a criminal record in my personal history. Hearing her bring it up herself was particularly infuriating. Is digging up the past all you know how to do? I also know how to create coincidental meetings. Her impervious attitude almost made me laugh in frustration. What did I do to deserve being haunted by you? Helen's gaze was heavy, her eyes filled with a complex mix of emotions. Your mistake was getting involved with me 10 years ago, Billy. For once, I agreed with her. I clenched my fists, trying to calm down and have a rational conversation with her. What do you want from me? What will it take for you to leave me alone? I'm not intentionally following you. It's all fate. Why won't you believe me? Seeing her still hiding behind these vague excuses, my patience finally ran out. I decided to call her bluff. Fine. You want to talk about fate? Let's make a bet and see if it's really meant to be. Helen's eyes narrowed, a hint of curiosity in her voice. What's the bet? I glanced at the time, my words coming out fast and sharp. No phones, $100 in cash. We each get on a bus going in opposite directions from here. If you can find me before midnight, I'll believe we're fated. And if I find you, what's my reward? If I don't, what's the penalty? That was the question I was waiting for. The reward and penalty are the same. The loser has to grant the winner one request, no questions asked. Helen nodded in understanding and agreed without a second thought. She stated her request immediately. If I win, you have to give me a chance to pursue you again. Hearing that she didn't say remarry, I breathed a sigh of relief, but then I sensed something was off. I looked at her suspiciously. You're that confident you'll win? Helen just smiled, didn't say a word, and handed me her phone. Her turning her back was all the answer I needed. Aren't you going to ask what my request is? With her back to me, Helen waved her hand dismissively. I don't need to know, because she was sure she would win. The last bus in West City ran until 9 o'clock. Helen rode it to the end of the line, then got off and sat on a bench, watching the distant city lights. The lights on the office building across the street had changed 3,000 times in the past hour, if she had counted correctly. When the count reached 5,000, she stood up, hailed a cab, and went back to the hotel. If she hadn't been mistaken before she left, the room key in my hand was for 1508. She got into the elevator and pressed the button for the 15th floor. It was late, and the entire floor was silent. She walked to room 8, leaned against the wall, and waited for midnight to arrive. As the clock ticked closer to 12, her heart beat faster. She wasn't entirely sure about this bet. She believed her fate with me wasn't over, so she had followed her instincts and come back here. 11:59. The elevator chimed. She stood up straight, her hands at her sides, and turned to look. Her eyes met a gaze of utter shock.